between intelligence agencies' criminals and hidden forces. The runtime itself reflects the ambition, a massive cinematic experience stretching over nearly 4 hours, making it one of the longest mainstream films ever released. But length is not the story, emotion is, and this story is full of it. The film opens with tension, not action, a slow build, a quiet storm, because the makers understand one thing: silence creates fear. Then comes the explosion, gunshots, chaos, betrayal. Hamza does not hesitate, because hesitation gets you killed. And he has already lost too much. As the story progresses, we see layers unfold: political conspiracies, hidden agendas, personal vendettas. Every character matters, every decision has consequences. The film does not try to be simple, it embraces complexity. And that is what makes it powerful. Ranveer Singh returns in a much darker and more intense avatar, taking his character to a completely different level. Compared to the first film, he is not just acting, he is living the character. Every expression, every movement, every silence feels real. Because Hamza is not a hero, he is something else, something dangerous. The audience is not asked to love him, they are forced to understand him. And that is far more powerful. Meanwhile, new and returning characters bring depth to the narrative. Each one has their own story, their own motive, their own truth, and sometimes their own lies, because in this world, trust is the most expensive currency, and almost no one can afford it. The story also dives deeper into Hamza's past, revealing the pain, the trauma, and the transformation that made him who he is today. This is not just a sequel, this is an expansion, a deeper look into a broken man trying to fix a broken world. But the question remains, can someone who is broken fix anything, or will he destroy everything instead? The film constantly plays with this idea, blurring the line between hero and villain, right and wrong, patriot and monster. Because sometimes they are the same person, and Hamza is walking that line every second. The night is never truly silent, it only waits for the moment when everything breaks. Hamza stands at the center of a city that no longer sleeps, every corner watched, every movement tracked, because power tracks enemies, and Hamza has too much of it. But power is not what drives him. It is something deeper, something darker: memory, fragments of a past he cannot escape, faces that refuse to fade, voices that still echo, and one name that changed everything. The story moves forward into a world where alliances are temporary and loyalty is just another illusion. Hamza is building something, a network, a system, a force, not just to rule, but to fight, because somewhere out there, bigger game is being played, and he is only a part of it. The intelligence agencies begin to notice the shift patterns, emerging connections forming. They know something is coming, but they do not know what, and that is what scares them, because uncertainty is more dangerous than truth. Meanwhile, the underworld is changing. Old leaders are falling, new ones are rising, and Hamza stands above them all, not because he is the strongest, but because he understands the game. He knows when to speak and when to stay silent. He knows when to strike and when to wait, and most importantly, he knows fear, not how to feel it, but how to use it. The film begins to explore the psychological depth of its characters, showing not just what they do, but why they do it. Every action has a reason, every betrayal has a history, and every death has a consequence. Hamza is not alone in this journey. There are others, some who follow him, some who challenge him, and some who pretend to be on his side. One such figure emerges from the shadows, a man who does not believe in loyalty, only an outcome. He sees Hamza not as a leader, but as a threat, and threats must be removed. Their first encounter is not violent, it is quiet, controlled, two minds trying to read each other, two predators circling, waiting for the right moment. Because in this world, the first move can be the last. As the tension builds, the film shifts between multiple locations, each one adding a new layer to the story. Borders become meaningless, because the war is everywhere. Information becomes the most powerful weapon, and those who control it control everything. Hamza begins to uncover pieces of a larger conspiracy, names that should not be connected, events that do not make sense until they do. And when they do, the truth is far worse than he imagined. This is not just about power, this is about control. Control over nations, control over systems, control over people. And somewhere at the top of it all is Bade Sahab, still unseen, still unknown, but now closer than ever. The film carefully builds his presence, not by showing him, but by showing his impact: decisions being made, lives being destroyed, wars being started, all without a face. And that makes him more dangerous, because you cannot fight what you cannot see. Hamza realizes that his mission is bigger than revenge, it is about exposure, about bringing truth to light. But truth has consequences, and not everyone wants it to come out. As he digs deeper, the risks increase. People around him start to fall, some are taken, some are killed, some disappear without a trace. And with every loss, Hamza becomes colder, more distant, more dangerous. Because pain does not break him anymore, it sharpens him. The narrative continues to push the limits of storytelling, blending action with emotion, strategy with chaos. Scenes transition from intense action sequences to moments of complete silence, allowing the audience to feel every second. Because this is not just a visual experience, it is emotional, it is psychological, it is personal. The story also highlights the cost of war, not just on soldiers, but on everyone involved, families, friends, innocent people caught in the crossfire. Because war does not choose sides, it consumes everything. Hamza begins to question his own path. Not because he is weak, but because he is human. Somewhere deep inside Jaskrat still exists, still fighting, still hoping. But hope is dangerous, because it can distract you. And in this world, distraction can kill you. As the second act progresses, the pace increases, events start to collide, stories begin to merge. And the lines between past and present blur, revealing truths that change everything. A betrayal is uncovered not from an enemy, but from someone close, someone trusted, and that changes the game, because betrayal from within hurts more and destroys faster. Hamza does not react immediately. He waits, observes, plans. Because revenge is not about anger, it is about timing. And his timing is perfect. The confrontation that follows is intense, not just physically, but emotionally. Words are exchanged, truths are revealed. And for a moment, everything stops, because in that moment, nothing else matters but the truth, and the truth is never simple. The truth does not arrive suddenly. It builds slowly, quietly, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Hamza now stands in a place where trust no longer exists. Every face looks familiar, but every intention feels unknown. The betrayal he uncovered was not just personal, it was strategic, a move planned long before he even realized the game had begun. This was never about one man, this was about control of the entire system, and Hamza was being guided step by step without even knowing. The realization changes him, not emotionally, but mentally. He starts to see patterns, connections that were invisible before. Every mission, every encounter, every loss now makes sense, because they were all part of something bigger, something designed. Someone designed it. And that someone is still watching. The film now shifts into a darker tone, not just in visuals, but in emotion, because now it is no longer about discovering the enemy, it is about surviving them. Hamza begins to isolate himself, not out of fear, but out of necessity, because anyone close to him becomes a target, and he cannot afford more losses. But isolation comes with its own cost: silence. And in silence, memories grow louder. We begin to see more of Jaskrat not as a warrior, but as a man who once had a life, a purpose beyond violence, a man who believed in something before everything was taken from him. These flashbacks are not just for emotion, they are clues, pieces of a puzzle that slowly connect to the present, because the past is not gone, it is shaping everything back in the present. The tension continues to rise. The intelligence network is now actively hunting Hamza, not to capture, but to eliminate, because he knows too much, and knowledge is more dangerous than any weapon. At the same time, the underworld begins to fracture. Leaders who once followed him now question him. Some see him as unstable, some see him as a liability, and some see him as an opportunity. Because when a king weakens, others rise. A power struggle begins, not loud, but silent. Deals are made, alliances shift, plans are rewritten. And in the middle of it all, Hamza remains still, observing, waiting, because he knows something they do not. The real enemy is not here, it is above them. And until that enemy falls, nothing will change. The story now introduces a critical turning point, a hidden location, a place that holds answers, information that was never meant to be found. Hamza reaches it, but he is not alone. Others have followed, enemies, and perhaps something worse. The sequence that follows is intense, but controlled, every move calculated, every decision precise, because this is not just survival. This is revelation. What he finds inside changes everything: documents, records, proof of operations that go beyond borders, beyond governments, beyond anything he imagined. This is not just corruption, this is control at the highest level. And at the center of it, a name, finally, a connection to Bade Sahab, not a face, not yet, but enough to move forward, enough to start the end. But every discovery comes with a cost. The location is compromised. The escape is not easy. What follows is one of the most intense sequences in the narrative, not just because of action, but because of stakes, because now it is not just about Hamza, it is about what he carries, the truth, and the truth must survive. Even if he does not, he fights not for revenge, but for purpose, and that changes everything, because a man with revenge is dangerous. But a man with purpose is unstoppable. The escape is successful, but not without loss. Another ally falls, another connection is broken. And with each loss, Hamza becomes more focused, more determined, more dangerous than ever before. The film now approaches its midpoint, where everything begins to accelerate, where secrets turn into weapons and decisions turn into consequences. The connection to Bade Sahab becomes clearer, not fully revealed, but enough to understand his reach, his influence, his power. This is not a man, this is a system, a network so deep that removing one part changes nothing. And that is the real challenge, because you cannot destroy a system by attacking it directly. You have to break it from within, and Hamza is the perfect weapon for that, because he was never part of the system, he was created outside it. And now, he is ready to destroy it, but the system is not blind, it sees him, it studies him, and now it moves against him. The next phase begins not as a reaction, but as an attack, and Hamza is the target. The attack does not come with warning. It arrives suddenly, fast, precise, relentless. Hamza is no longer hunting, he is being hunted. Every move he makes, every step he takes is already known because the system he is fighting has eyes everywhere. This is not just surveillance. This is control. The people he trusted, the places he used, the routes he followed, all compromised, all exposed. And for the first time, Hamza is forced to react instead of plan. But even in chaos, he does not lose focus, because this is what he was trained for: adapt, survive, strike. The attacks come in waves, not just physical but psychological messages, sent warnings delivered. Threats made not just against him, but against anyone connected to him. Because the enemy understands one thing: to break a man, you do not attack him, you attack what he cares about. And Hamza still cares, even if he does not show it. The story now moves into one of its most intense phases, where every second matters, where every decision can lead to life or death. The pace increases, the tension rises, and the lines between hunter and hunted disappear completely. Hamza begins to fight back, not blindly, but strategically. He starts cutting off connections, destroying routes, eliminating key players, not to win, but to create confusion. Because confusion is the first step to breaking control, the system begins to react not with fear, but with calculation, because this is not the first time it has faced resistance. But Hamza is different. He does not follow patterns, he creates them. And that makes him unpredictable. The narrative now introduces another major character, a figure who operates within the system, but does not fully belong to it, a man of intelligence, of strategy, of patience. He has been watching Hamza, studying him, understanding him, not as an enemy, but as a possibility. Their paths finally cross. And this time there is no silence, no observation, only confrontation. Their conversation is not about threats, it is about truth, because both of them understand the reality: the system is broken. But breaking it will come at a cost that neither of them may survive. This interaction becomes a turning point, because for the first time Hamza is not alone, not fully, but enough to change the direction of the story. The film uses this moment to slow down, to allow the audience to breathe, to understand, because what comes next will not stop. The alliance is fragile, built on necessity, not trust. But sometimes that is enough. Together they begin to plan not an attack, but a disruption, something that will shake the system at its core. Because small victories are no longer enough, they need something bigger, something irreversible. The plan is complex, multiple layers, multiple targets, multiple risks. Because failure is not an option. Failure means death, not just for them, but for many others. As the preparation begins, the film dives deeper into its themes: power, control, sacrifice. Because to destroy something powerful, you must be willing to lose everything, and that is the real question. What is Hamza willing to lose? The answer is everything. The execution begins step by step, each phase unfolding with precision. The system starts to shake, not collapse, but shift. And that is enough, because even a small crack can bring down something massive. But the system fights back harder than before, because now it sees the threat clearly, and it will not allow it to grow. The conflict escalates, action becomes more intense, consequences become more severe, losses increase, and the cost becomes real. The alliance is tested not by enemies, but by decisions, because when lives are at stake, every choice matters, and not every choice is right. Tension builds between them, differences emerge, methods clash, because they are not the same, they never were, and that creates friction, but also strength, because different perspectives create better strategies if they survive long enough to use them. As the operation reaches its peak, everything begins to converge, all paths, all characters, all motives leading to one moment, one event that will change everything. The system is about to be exposed. But exposure is only the beginning, because once the truth is out, there is no going back, and not everyone will survive what comes next. Hamza stands at the edge, closer than ever to the man behind everything, closer than ever to Bade Sahab. But with every step forward, the danger doubles, because the closer you get to power, the harder it fights back. And this time it is ready. Power does not fall easily. It resists, it fights, it destroys everything in its path. And now it is fighting back with full force. The system has identified the threat completely, not just Hamza, but everyone connected to him. Every ally becomes a target, every plan becomes a risk. Because now this is not a hidden war, this is open conflict. Hamza moves faster than ever before, no hesitation, no second chances, only action, because he knows time is running out. The closer he gets to the truth, the closer he gets to death. But stopping is no longer an option, because now this is bigger than him. The disruption they started has begun to spread, small cracks turning into fractures, fractures turning into collapse, but not completely, because the system is adapting, changing form, protecting itself. And at the center of it, still untouched, still unseen, Bade Sahab. His presence grows stronger, not weaker, because chaos is where he thrives, and chaos is everywhere now. The alliance begins to break under pressure, not because of betrayal, but because of reality, different goals, different priorities, different definitions of victory. Hamza wants to destroy, the other wants to control, and that difference creates conflict, because destruction is final, but control is power. Their arguments grow intense, not emotional, but logical, because both of them are right, and that is what Makes it difficult. There is no clear path, only consequences, and every path leads to loss. Meanwhile, the system launches its most aggressive move, yet a coordinated attack not just on individuals, but on information data, erased records, destroyed evidence, removed, because if the truth does not exist, it cannot be exposed. Hamza realizes the danger immediately. This is not just defense, this is reset. The system is trying to erase itself to rebuild stronger, more secure, more invisible. And if that happens, everything they did will mean nothing. The urgency increases, the stakes rise, and the mission changes. It is no longer about finding the truth. It is about saving it, because truth is now the only weapon left. The next sequence unfolds with extreme intensity, a race against time, multiple locations, multiple objectives, all connected, all critical. Hamza leads from the front, not as a leader, but as a fighter, because this is where he belongs, in the middle of chaos, where decisions are instant and survival is earned. The system responds with equal force, every move countered, every step challenged. Because this is not just a battle, this is a war of intelligence, strategy against strategy, mind against mind, and neither side is willing to lose. Losses become heavier, more personal, because now there is no distance left, everything is close, everything is direct, and that makes it painful. One of the most important figures in Hamza's journey falls not as a sacrifice, but as a consequence, a result of choices, of risks of war. This moment changes Hamza completely, not externally, but internally. Something shifts, something breaks, and something new takes its place. He is no longer fighting for revenge, he is no longer fighting for truth, he is now fighting to end it completely. No system, no control, no shadows, only an end, and that makes him more dangerous than ever before. Because a man with nothing left cannot be controlled. The story now accelerates toward its final phase. Everything becomes faster, sharper, more intense. Because the end is approaching. The connection to Bade Sahab is now undeniable, clear, direct, and within reach. But reaching him will not be easy. Because he is not alone, he never was. Layers of protection, layers of deception, built over years, designed to be unbreakable. But every system has a weakness, and Hamza is getting closer to finding it. The final plan begins to take shape, not perfect, but enough, because perfection does not exist in war, only outcomes. And this outcome will decide everything. The stage is set, the players are ready, and the final move is about to begin. The final phase does not begin with noise, it begins with silence, a silence that feels unnatural, because everything that led to this moment has been loud, violent, unforgiving. But now there is calm, and that calm is dangerous. Hamza moves carefully, not because he is afraid, but because he understands one mistake now ends everything. The plan is in motion, every step already decided, every risk already accepted. Because there is no turning back, not anymore. The system senses the shift. Something is different, something is wrong, but it cannot see clearly, because for the first time it is reacting instead of controlling. And that is its weakness. Hamza and his remaining allies move through layers of security, each one stronger than the last, not just physical barriers, but psychological ones designed to confuse, to delay, to break focus. But Hamza does not stop. He has gone too far, lost too much, to stop now. The tension builds with every step, every second stretching longer, every moment heavier. Because the closer they get, the more real it becomes. This is not just another mission, this is the end, or the beginning of something worse. As they reach deeper, the truth begins to reveal itself, not in full, but in fragments, enough to understand, enough to fear. The system is not just one entity, it is many connected, interdependent, self-sustaining. Removing one part will not destroy it, it will adapt, it will survive. And that realization changes everything, because now the mission is impossible. And yet it must be done. Hamza faces the reality for the first time. Victory is not guaranteed, in fact it is unlikely, but that does not matter. Because this is not about winning, this is about ending the cycle, even if it costs everything. The final layer approaches, the closest anyone has ever come to the center, to the truth, to Bade Sahab. The guards are not many, but they are enough, trained, prepared, unbreakable. The confrontation is inevitable. And it comes without warning, fast, brutal, unforgiving. Every move is precise, every strike intentional, because this is not chaos, this is controlled violence. Hamza moves like a force, not human, not emotional, only purpose, only direction. The path clears, but not without cost, more losses, more sacrifice. Because nothing comes free, especially not the truth. Finally, they reach the center, a place hidden from the world, untouched, protected, the heart of the system. And there, for the first time, he sees him, Bade Sahab, not as a shadow, not as a voice, but as a man, calm, composed, unshaken, as if everything that has happened was expected. The room is silent. No chaos, no panic, only presence, because this is not a battlefield. This is a meeting, two sides finally facing each other. The conversation begins not with threats, but with understanding, because Bade Sahab knows why Hamza is here, and Hamza knows what must be done. Truth is revealed slowly, layer by layer, not as a confession, but as a lesson. The system was never meant to protect it, was meant to control, to maintain balance, to prevent chaos by creating it a cycle. Endless, unbreakable, and Hamza was part of that cycle. From the beginning, every step, He took every mission he completed, every loss he suffered, led him here not by chance, but by design. This revelation hits deeper than anything before because it takes away choice, it takes away purpose, and replaces it with reality. He was never fighting the system, he was being shaped by it. But even now there is a choice. Bade Sahab offers it not as mercy, but as logic, join, or end. Control or destroy, but destruction comes with consequences not just for him, but for everything, because removing the system will create a void. And a void is worse than control. Hamza listens, not silently, but completely, because this is the moment where everything decides itself not through action, but through choice, and his choice will define the end. That is what everything comes down to, not power, not revenge, not control, only choice. Hamza stands face to face with the man who shaped everything, the man who created the system, the man who turned chaos into control and control into power. Bade Sahab does not move, does not react, because he already knows this moment was inevitable. The room feels heavier not because of fear, but because of truth, a truth that cannot be ignored anymore. Hamza looks at him, not as an enemy, but as the source, the beginning and possibly the end. All the pain, all the loss, all the destruction leads here, and now it demands an answer. Bade Sahab speaks again, not louder, but deeper, explaining what happens next if the system falls. Everything breaks, nations weaken, power shifts, chaos spreads, and innocent people will suffer the most, because order, even if controlled, still protects something. But Hamza sees it differently because he has lived the other side, the side where control destroys lives, silently, where systems decide who survives and who does not, where truth is buried and lies become reality. For him, this is not protection, this is manipulation, and manipulation must end. The silence returns, but this time it is not empty, it is full, full of decision, full of consequence. Hamza steps forward, not fast, not slow, just certain, because for the first time there is no confusion, no doubt, no hesitation, only clarity. He makes his choice not for himself, not for revenge, but for what he believes is right, even if it is wrong, because sometimes right and wrong do not matter, only action does. What follows is not just a fight, it is a conclusion, the final clash between control and freedom, between system and chaos, between two men who believe they are right. The confrontation is intense, but not endless, because this is not about strength, it is about will, and Hamza has nothing left to lose. That gives him an edge, a dangerous one. The system begins to collapse, not instantly, but visibly, because removing the center creates instability, and instability spreads fast. Alarms, movement, panic. For the first time, the system loses control. Bade Sahab realizes it not with fear, but with acceptance, because even he knew this was possible, just unlikely. The final moments are not loud, they are quiet, because endings are rarely dramatic, they are final. Hamza stands there, in the middle of everything breaking, not victorious, not defeated, just present, because this was never about winning, it was about ending, and the end is here. But endings create beginnings. The system is gone, or at least broken. But the world does not stop, it never does. Power will return, control will rebuild, new systems will rise, because that is how the world works, cycles, endless, unavoidable. The question is not if it will happen again, the question is who will control it next. Hamza walks away, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as something else, something undefined, because labels no longer matter, not after everything. The story closes not with answers, but with thoughts, because some questions are meant to remain. What is right, what is wrong, what is necessary, and what is too much? There are no clear answers, only perspectives. And that is what makes the story powerful, because it does not tell you what to think, it makes you think. Durandhar, the revenge, is not just a story, it is an experience, a journey through power, through pain, through purpose, and in the end it leaves you with one idea: in a world controlled by systems, the most dangerous thing is a man who refuses to be controlled. The world does not change overnight, even after something as powerful as a system falls. The silence that follows is not peace, it is uncertainty, a pause before the next movement begins. Cities continue to function, people continue to live, but something feels different, invisible yet undeniable, because when control disappears, freedom does not immediately take its place, confusion does, and confusion spreads faster than fear. Hamza moves through this new world without a destination, not hiding, not leading, just existing. For the first time in a long time, he is not being followed, not being watched, not being controlled. But instead of relief, there is emptiness, because a life built on purpose cannot suddenly exist without it. And his purpose is gone. The system he fought, the enemy he chased, the truth he carried, all of it has reached its end, or at least that is what it seems. But the world is never that simple. Fragments remain, pieces of the system, not destroyed, just scattered, waiting, adapting, rebuilding. Because systems do not die, they evolve. And somewhere in the background, that evolution has already begun. The narrative now shifts into a slower pace, not because the story is ending, but because it is transforming. From war to aftermath, from action to consequence, we begin to see the impact of everything that happened. Governments struggling to maintain stability, agencies trying to regain control, leaders searching for answers. But there are no clear answers, because the structure they depended on no longer exists, and rebuilding it Will take time that they may not have. Meanwhile, the underworld rises again stronger, more aggressive. Because without a central system controlling it, power becomes fragmented, and fragmented power is unpredictable. New leaders emerge not like the old ones, more ruthless, more ambitious. Because they have learned from the past, they do not want control, they want dominance, and dominance is far more dangerous. Hamza becomes aware of this shift not through information, but through instinct, because he understands patterns, he understands what happens when power disappears. It creates a vacuum, and vacuums are always filled. The question is by whom. He tries to stay away, to remain disconnected. But the world does not allow it, because once you become part of something this big, you never truly leave, you only move further away from the center. But the pull always remains. A new conflict begins to form, not as large as before, not as structured, but more chaotic, more unpredictable. Because there is no single enemy anymore, there are many, each with their own agenda, each with their own version of control. And that makes it harder, because you cannot destroy chaos. The way you destroy a system, you have to navigate it, survive it, understand it. The film uses this phase to explore a deeper theme. What happens after victory? What happens when the mission ends? Who do you become when the fight is over? Hamza struggles with this, not visibly, but internally, because for someone like him, peace is unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things are difficult to accept. He begins to question himself, not his actions, but his existence. What is he now without the war, without the purpose, without the system to fight? Is he free? Or is he lost? These questions do not have immediate answers, because answers take time, and time is something he has never truly had. The story introduces smaller but impactful events, conflicts that seem unrelated but slowly connect, showing that even without the original system, the influence still exists in different forms, different people, different decisions, because systems are not just structures, they are ideas, and ideas do not die easily. Hamza encounters individuals affected by the aftermath, people who suffered, people who benefited, people who are still trying to understand what happened. These interactions add emotional depth, showing that the consequences of his actions are not limited to power. They affect lives, real lives, and that realization adds weight, not regret but awareness, because he does not see himself as a savior. He never did, but now he begins to see the impact of being the one who changed everything. The narrative slowly builds toward another realization, something subtle but important. The system may be gone, but its ideology still exists in fragments, in minds and actions. And unless that is addressed, the cycle will repeat. This sets up the next phase of the story, not as a continuation of the same conflict, but as an evolution of it, because the enemy is no longer visible, it is conceptual, and fighting something like that requires a different approach. Hamza stands at a crossroads again, not forced this time, but chosen. He can walk away, disappear completely, leave everything behind, or he can step back, and not as a weapon, but as something else, something more aware, more controlled, more human. And that choice is even more difficult than the last one, because this time, there is no enemy forcing him, only himself. The story does not rush this decision, it lets it breathe, because this moment defines what comes next, not just for him, but for everything. The screen fades slowly into uncertainty, not an ending, not a beginning, but something in between, because some stories do not end, they continue in ways we do not immediately see. And this is one of them. Time passes, not fast, not slow, just enough to change things. The world begins to stabilize on the surface, systems start forming again, not the same as before, but similar, because people need structure, they need something to rely on, even if that structure once controlled them. This is the paradox. Humans resist control, but fear chaos. And between those two systems are born. Hamza observes all of this from a distance, not interfering, not reacting, just watching. Because observation teaches more than action. He notices patterns returning, familiar behaviors, familiar decisions, different faces, same intentions. Power is being rebuilt. Quietly, carefully, because those who survived the fall learned from it. They will not make the same mistakes again, they will make better ones. And that is what makes it dangerous. A new group begins to rise, not publicly, not visibly, but effectively. They do not call themselves a system. They do not show control. They operate differently, through influence, through information, through perception. Because controlling how people think is more powerful than controlling what they do. Hamza realizes this shift immediately. This is not a replacement, this is an upgrade, more subtle, more refined, more difficult to detect. And if this grows, it will become stronger than the previous system. Because it will not need force, only belief. The narrative deepens into psychological territory, exploring how power evolves, how control adapts, and how people become part of it, without even realizing. This is no longer about visible enemies, it is about invisible influence, a war that cannot be seen, but is constantly happening. Hamza understands one thing clearly now: destroying structures is not enough, because structures can be rebuilt, but ideas need to be challenged differently. And that requires more than strength, it requires understanding. He begins to move again, not aggressively, not forcefully, but deliberately, each step calculated, not to attack, but to learn to understand this new form of control because fighting something you do not understand is failure. He tracks movements, follows information trails, connects small details, and slowly the picture becomes clearer. This new power is decentralized, no single leader, no central authority, which makes it harder to target, but not impossible, because even decentralized systems have origins and origins can be traced. As he digs deeper, he discovers something unexpected. This new structure is built on the remains of the old one, not completely new, just evolved, which means the past is still connected, still relevant, still dangerous. This realization brings him back not physically, but mentally, to where everything began, to the choices he made, to the consequences he created. Because this new system exists partly because of what he did, and that creates responsibility not forced, but accepted. The story now takes a reflective turn, not slowing down but deepening as Hamza begins to accept his role not as a destroyer, but as a disruptor, someone who changes the course, but does not control it. And that distinction is important because control is what created the problem, not change. The people around him begin to change too. Some recognize him, some fear him, some seek him not for protection, but for direction, because when someone breaks a system, they become a symbol whether they want to or not, and symbols carry weight. He does not embrace it, but he does not reject it either, because denying influence does not remove it. It only makes it uncontrolled, so he chooses balance, not leadership, not isolation, something in between, something new. The narrative builds toward another major shift, the realization that this new system is already spreading faster than the old one, because it does not rely on structure. It relies on people, and people spread ideas faster than any network. This creates urgency again, not the same as before, but real, because time is limited before this becomes unstoppable. Hamza prepares once more, not for war, but for intervention, a different kind of battle, one that requires patience, precision, and understanding. Because this enemy cannot be defeated by force, only by breaking its foundation. And its foundation is belief. The stage is set again, not for a repeat, but for evolution, because the fight has changed, and so has he. No longer just a weapon, no longer just a survivor, but something more, something aware, something prepared for what comes next. And what comes next will test him in ways nothing before ever did. Because this time the enemy is not outside, it is everywhere. The battlefield has changed. There are no clear lines, anymore, no borders, no fixed enemies, only influence, invisible, persistent. Everywhere. Hamza understands this more clearly now. This is not a war of bullets, this is a war of minds, and in a war like this, the strongest weapon is not strength, it is perception. The new system does not force control, creates acceptance. People do not feel controlled, they feel guided. And that is what makes it powerful, because resistance disappears before it even begins. Hamza moves carefully through this landscape, not as a fighter, but as an observer, listening more than speaking, watching more than acting, because information now is more valuable than action. He notices how narratives are being shaped, how truth is being adjusted, not changed completely, just enough to influence direction. This is precision, not chaos, and precision is harder to break. The people involved are not obvious, they do not carry weapons, they carry ideas, they spread influence through conversations, through decisions, through subtle changes. And that makes them harder to identify, because they look like everyone else. The story now dives deeper into human behavior, how easily people adapt, how quickly they accept what feels normal, even if it is not. Hamza begins to interact, carefully testing reactions, understanding patterns, because before he can act, he needs to understand completely. He identifies key nodes, not leaders, but connectors, people who influence others without appearing to. These are the real targets, because removing them creates disruption, not visible, but effective. The strategy shifts again, not destruction, but disconnection, breaking links, interrupting flow, creating doubt, because doubt is the beginning of resistance, and resistance can slow down any system. The process is slow but intentional, each move creating small changes, small disruptions that begin to spread, but the system notices not immediately, but eventually, because even subtle changes leave traces, and this system is designed to detect them. A response begins, not aggressive, but adaptive. The narratives shift again, countering the disruptions, rebalancing influence, because this is not static, it evolves just like him. This creates a new kind of tension, not explosive, but constant, a silent battle, where every move is matched, every change balanced, and no side gains clear advantage. Hamza realizes something important: this cannot be won the same way as before. There is no center to destroy, no single target to eliminate, because the system is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. This forces him to rethink everything, not just strategy, but purpose. What does winning even mean now? If the system cannot be destroyed, then what? The answer begins to form slowly, not as a solution, but as a realization. This is not about ending control, it is about limiting it, not about destroying influence, but balancing it, because complete freedom leads to chaos, and complete control leads to oppression. The truth lies somewhere in between, and maintaining that balance is the real challenge. The narrative becomes more philosophical, exploring the idea that systems are not the enemy imbalance is. An imbalance is created by extremes. Hamza begins to act differently now, not against the system, but within it, introducing disruptions, but also stabilizing where needed, not as a ruler, but as a regulator, a force that prevents extremes. This role is unfamiliar but necessary because no one else is doing it. The people around him begin to notice not who he is, but what is happening, changes that feel natural, but are not accidental shifts that bring balance without control. This creates curiosity, and curiosity leads to awareness. Slowly, the system begins to weaken, not in structure, but in influence, because awareness reduces control, and control relies on lack of awareness. This is progress, but it is not complete because the system still exists. Still, depth still grows. The journey is no longer about reaching an end. It is about maintaining a state, a constant effort, a continuous process. Because balance is not permanent, it must be maintained. Every moment, every decision, every action. Hamza accepts this not as a burden, but as reality. There is no final victory, no final ending, only continuation, only responsibility. The story moves forward, not toward a conclusion, but toward understanding that some battles are never meant to end, they are meant to be managed. And those who understand this do not seek victory, they seek balance. Hamza walks forward again, not chasing, not escaping, but moving with purpose, a different kind of purpose, one that does not end, one that does not break, one that simply continues, because the world will always change, and someone will always be needed to keep it from going too far in any direction. And now that someone is him. Balance, it sounds simple, but it is not. It is fragile, constantly shifting, always under pressure. And maintaining, it requires more than strength, it requires awareness. Hamza begins to understand this fully now. His role is no longer defined by enemies, but by situations, by moments where things begin to lean too far in one direction, because that is where imbalance begins. He does not wait for collapse anymore, he acts before it happens, quietly, carefully, without drawing attention, because attention creates resistance, and resistance creates conflict. The world around him continues to evolve faster than before. Technology grows, communication spreads, ideas travel instantly, which makes control easier, but also more dangerous, because influence now can reach everywhere at once. The new system adapts to this perfectly. It uses speed, uses reach, uses connection to maintain its presence without ever being seen. Hamza tracks these patterns not through force, but through observation. He studies behavior, not individuals, but groups, because groups reveal trends and trends reveal direction. He notices something new, a shift in how influence is applied, not direct, not even subtle, but integrated, built into daily life, so naturally that it feels normal. This is the most dangerous stage, because when control feels normal, it becomes invisible, and invisible control cannot be challenged unless it is recognized. This becomes his focus: recognition, not destruction, not disruption, but awareness, because once people see, they begin to question, and questioning is the beginning of change. He starts small, introducing ideas, creating moments of doubt, encouraging reflection, not forcefully, but naturally, because forced awareness feels like control, and control is what he is trying to prevent. The impact is slow, but real people begin to notice patterns, begin to question narratives, begin to think independently, and that creates resistance, not against a visible enemy, but against unseen influence. The system reacts as expected, adjusting narrative, shifting focus, redirecting attention, because that is how it survives, by staying ahead. But this time it is different, because now there is opposition, not in force, but in thought, and thought is difficult to control. This creates a new dynamic, a constant push and pull between influence and awareness, between control and freedom, neither side winning completely, but neither losing either. This is balance in motion, not perfect, but functional. Hamza continues to operate within this space, not dominating, not disappearing, but existing where he is needed, sometimes creating disruption, sometimes restoring stability, always observing, always learning, because the system is still evolving. And to keep up, he must evolve too. The story now reflects a deeper truth, that no system, no matter how powerful, is ever final. Everything changes, everything adapts, everything moves, and those who understand this do not try to stop change, they guide it carefully, responsibly, without control. This is the difference between power and understanding. Power forces direction, understanding shapes it, and shaping is far more effective in the long run. Hamza begins to embrace this fully, letting go of the need to end things, and accepting need to maintain them. This does not make his path easier, it makes it endless, because there is no final point, no moment of completion, only continuation. But in that continuation, there is purpose, a different kind of purpose, not driven by loss, not driven by revenge, but driven by responsibility. And responsibility is heavier, because it does not fade, it stays. Every moment, every decision, every consequence. The world continues to move, sometimes toward balance, sometimes away from it, and each time he adjusts, not perfectly, but enough, because perfection is not required, only effort is. The narrative settles into this rhythm, a continuous flow of change and response of influence and awareness, showing that the story is no longer about events, but about evolution, and evolution never stops. Hamza looks at the world not as something to fix, but as something to understand, and in that understanding he finds clarity, not complete, but enough to keep going, enough to continue, because that is what this has become: a journey without end, a role without title, a purpose without conclusion. And sometimes that is what matters most, not the end, but the continuation.